Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to share with you how I make homemade tofu using a common and easy to find ingredients as coagulant. So to make a smaller batch of tofu, of course you'll need soybeans. I use 2 cups of dried soybeans. Soak the soybeans in water, preferably use non-chlorinated water. You can use distilled water, spring water. You can soak the beans at least 6 to 8 hours or overnight. After soaking, rinse the soaked beans several times until the water gets clear. You can use a strainer or a colander to make the straining easier and faster. I usually use my hands, especially if I only do a small batch of soy milk. Collect the water that you use for soaking and the first rinse, and you can use it for watering your indoor plants. The water that you just used for soaking, it has nutrients in the water that your plants will like. Please use a strainer or a colander when draining the water to avoid spilling the soybeans. Before you can make tofu, you will first need to make soy milk. In a blender, put the soaked soybeans. If you don't have a blender, you can grind the soaked beans the old-fashioned way, using a hand crank grinder or a stone grinder. Add 3 cups of water into the blender to blend the soybeans until the beans are fine and smooth. Add another cup of water or so as necessary, especially if the mixture gets too thick while it is blending. The more fine and smooth the mixture is, the better. It means you will get the most milk out of the beans. The blending is done. The soybean puree is ready for boiling. Pour the pureed soybeans in a big pot. Make sure that the pot is big enough so that it has room for boiling. Add 7 to 8 cups of water. You can add water and rinse to remove most of the milk that's sticking in the blender. Cover the pot and set the stove on medium heat and let the mixture boil slowly. Keep an eye and never leave the pot unattended while it is heating up. Check and stir the mixture often to prevent the soybean pulp from settling and sticking at the bottom of the pot. This is very important. This part is critical because the soy milk can overboil and you don't want to spill and waste the milk. Stir the milk as often as possible, scraping the bottom to keep the soy pulp from sticking on the bottom of the pot. You don't want the soy pulp to get burned. As the soy milk's heating up, when you see more bubbles come up, don't cover the pot all the way to slow down the heat buildup. When the milk starts to boil, lower the heat to medium-low so the milk does not overboil. It doesn't take too long to boil the soybeans. Once it's hot, it boils faster and it will rise above the pot if you let it be. If you see bubbles building more and more and it's boiling more and more, push the pot gently to the side away from the heat source. Usually, the vigorous boiling will subside. If you don't catch it sooner, you will end up with a milky mess, literally. Make sure that you slow boil the puree for about 10 to 12 minutes, after which let it cool off for a little bit before straining the soy milk. Be careful when you do the milk straining because you don't want to get burned. This is a manual way of making soy milk. If you have a soy maker, you can use it to skip the grinding and the boiling part. Some sophisticated soy makers have automatic strainers, so really all you need to do is season the milk. It's great to use if you want to make a small batch of soy milk for drinking or for tofu purposes. I use Soya Joy Soy Maker. It does a great job in making soy milk. Check the video description for kitchen products that I use in making tofu, particularly as shown in this video. Back to the tofu making. You can use a regular strainer to strain out the soy pulp, or you can use a cheesecloth or a mesh cloth. Use a spatula to help squeeze out the milk. I know it's quite a process to make tofu, especially if you make it from scratch and doing the manual process, but the more you do it, it gets easier. Honestly speaking though, homemade tofu is fresher, much better and healthier for you. If you're using a mesh cloth or a cheesecloth, make sure that you wring out or squeeze out as much milk as you can. I know it requires muscles to do it, but you can also use other tools to accomplish this job without using your muscle strength. You can use a heavy object as a weight. Some people use a rock or a board and clamps to squeeze out more milk. After straining the soy pulp, you have the soy milk. Don't toss the soy pulp away. You can use it for making veggie burger, patties. You can mix it in pancake batter. You can mix it in cake batter or make cornbread or in veggie loaf. You can also make cookies and you can mix it in smoothies as well. Put the soy pulp in a separate container. Just make sure that you refrigerate the soy pulp if you don't use it right away. It's time to make the tofu. In a clean pot, put the soy milk. Put the lid on and set the heat to medium. Bring the soy milk to a simmer or a gentle boil. Check the soy milk often to make sure that the soy milk does not boil vigorously. Stir the soy milk to keep the soy sediment from sticking at the bottom. Once the soy milk has come to a boil, add the coagulant. I use freshly squeezed lemon juice. 2 tablespoonfuls of lemon juice. I also add 2 tablespoons of salt. I use Himalayan pink salt. You can also use other salts such as sea salt or iodized salt. Stir the soy milk gently after adding the lemon juice and salt mix. Using lemon and salt will make the tofu finished product more savory, with a hint of salt and sour. There are other common coagulants that you can buy in stores, such as calcium sulfate or gypsum. There is also a combination of calcium and magnesium chloride, which is the nigari. Some people also use epsom salt as a coagulant. About a minute or two after adding the lemon juice and the pink salt into the simmering soy milk, the soy milk curds will start to form. The curds are what make the tofu blocks. The more coagulants you add, the harder the tofu it makes. The process is similar to making cheese. You'll need a coagulant to acidify the milk to make curds or milk clumps. It's time to form the tofu. I use this wooden mold for shaping the soy curds. Assemble the mold and make sure to line the mold with cheesecloth. You can also use thin cotton cloth or butter muslin. The cloth will catch the soy curds. Some plastic tofu molds are more sophisticated and they don't require cloth liner. There are many tofu molds available in stores or online. If you want to try to make tofu at home, feel free to use my affiliate link in the video description for the tofu molds that I use. For draining the whey, you'd need a sink or you can use a container to catch the excess liquid. Be careful when you do this to avoid spilling and burning yourself, especially if the mixture is still hot. Using a cup, pour the soy milk curds slowly but surely into the mold. Be careful and be patient in doing this part, as it takes a while for the whey to drain. Fill the mold up to the rim and wait for the curds to settle a bit before adding more. The draining part depends on the size and the kind of tofu mold you use. Some people will just use cloth for draining the whey, and they use the same cloth as a tofu mold. In my experience with tofu making, using a mold is easier. After filling the mold with soy curds, fold the cheesecloth in to cover the curds. The tofu mold I have used a separate wooden press. This is the last step. Press down hard the curds to remove excess liquid or whey. If you don't press it hard, the result will be watery, soft, and clumpy tofu. So I must emphasize that pressing down hard is important. You can use a heavy object as a weight. A jar filled with water will do the job as well. Some people will use a board and clamps to press down the forming tofu. You can also buy a tofu presser. It helps a lot, especially if you make a big batch of tofu. There are tofu molds that have drainer and presser attachments. There are several options to choose. The bottom line is, tofu making is easy. Let the tofu drain for at least 3 hours. After the initial draining in the sink, you can transfer it on a plate to catch any drops of liquid. If you don't use it right away, put it in the refrigerator. You can keep the weight on top and let it sit in the refrigerator until you're ready to use it. Letting it sit in the refrigerator for a while makes the tofu more packed and hard. In this video, I will also show you my easy-to-make tofu bites using the tofu that I made. It's time to unpack the tofu. Of course, you need to remove it from the mold. It's like opening a present. It's exciting. The feeling is great. And finally, you get to see and taste your homemade tofu. Ta-da! The finished product is extra firm tofu. It's my favorite tofu texture. The texture and the density of the tofu depends on the kind and the amount of coagulant you use. Since I use just lemon juice and pink salt, the result is firm and with a bit of salty and sour flavor. You can even eat it as it is. It's yummy.